Hey everyone, welcome to my guide on King Arthur. King Arthur is a unique warrior in SMITE, a stance switcher with no dedicated stance switch ability, resulting in him having a total of 8 abilities. Before we discuss strengths, weaknesses, and items, first we have to take a quick look at what is, at this time anyways, completely unique to King Arthur in SMITE. Firstly, the stance switching. King Arthur has 2 stances, a blue stance and an orange stance. When King Arthur casts any of his 3 normal abilities, he is switched over to the other stance. This works the same way on his 3 main abilities, however his ult is a completely different beast, and we'll get there in the abilities section. So other than when casting your ultimate, you will always be switched to your opposite set of abilities when you cast an ability. Now onto King Arthur's auto attacks. King Arthur lunges forward, striking in an AoE in front of him, and lunges himself toward the nearest enemy target. King Arthur's autos are also completely unaffected by attack speed, moving at a fixed speed at the very start of the game. Additionally, you'll notice that Arthur has quite a bit of recovery time after using these auto attacks. This is done to even out the fact that King Arthur has movement connected to his auto attacks. However, with his second and third ability in both stances, and his ultimate in orange stance, King Arthur can let himself lunge forward with his autos and cancel the recovery animation of the auto attack with an ability, giving him excellent, albeit slow, movement. These unique attributes will take some time to get used to, but like most things, just give it some time and it'll become second nature. Now let's talk about the character himself. King Arthur is a hyper-aggressive warrior with excellent base damage and defense, with numerous small crowd control effects that build up to a heavily control-oriented character. King Arthur struggles in the early levels and typically needs a few levels on him to get his base damage up, as well as get all 8 of his abilities ready to roll. He struggles into hard lockdown compositions, as he is quite slow moving and only has one form of CC immunity in his orange ultimate, which you typically want to use for damage rather than escape. Item-wise, King Arthur doesn't need much of any damage items, maybe 1 or 2 plus a damage-oriented starter item. This is because King Arthur's base damage is more than enough to carry him, and due to his very long-winded and non-burst oriented combos, he needs to survive long enough to perform all of his abilities in order to be effective. All of this can be bolstered by using on-hit items. While Arthur cannot use auto-attack on-hit items, he can use items that function on the hit of an ability, like the current Bluestone Pendant or Gladiator Shield. Typically, if one of these items is decent or good on other warriors, it is fantastic on King Arthur. King Arthur also benefits from base mana regen, as even with low mana costs on his abilities and a blue buff on, you'll be struggling with mana. Things like Genjis or Talisman are good options here, but don't feel the need to shoehorn this into your build as the mana becomes less and less problematic as the game goes on. Now let's get into King Arthur's abilities. Anytime he is hit by an ability, he gains 1% damage mitigation and begins to gain energy at an increased rate, up to 4% damage mitigation and an 80% energy gain. I'll touch on Arthur's energy later. For now, just know that as King Arthur participates in a trade, the longer it goes, the better it is for him. In blue stance, King Arthur's one is a long-range damaging projectile that runs along the ground and passes through all enemies, and gains a 50% damage bonus if it hits an enemy directly in front of King Arthur. This ability is okay as a poke tool, but is more used in conjunction with his other abilities to set up the 50% bonus damage for tactical nuke levels of damage. In orange stance, this ability becomes a very wide cone that, after a small windup, strikes and cripples all enemies hit by it. These abilities are King Arthur's main source of damage, so you typically want to use your other abilities to set these up. While using these abilities while trying to escape is a very, very bad idea, using your auto attacks to reposition yourself to hit a wave or poke an enemy god is a great way to establish lane pressure. In blue stance, King Arthur's 2 is a simple stomp in an area around him that slows enemies. And that's kinda it. Same deal as before, use it to set up your 1 or ult damage, or just use it to get away. In orange stance, King Arthur's 2 is a decent range dash that stops on the first enemy god hit, knocking them up into the air a small amount. This ability is fantastic for initiating or retreating from fights as well as interrupting channeled abilities. A simple auto orange 2 into blue 1 auto provides fantastic damage and allows an orange 1 right after as well. In blue stance, King Arthur's 3 is a slow moving dash that hits twice, reducing protections for a short time upon hitting, once each time. The slow movement of this ability and the fact that King Arthur isn't immune to any CC while dashing makes this ability more volatile than it might seem. It's great for getting King Arthur in range for an orange 1 or 2, but while retreating, it's actually one of the last movement options you want to use, rather than the first as your instincts might tell you to. Just be sure to keep the duration of the protection shred in mind, and try to capitalize on it with a 2-1 before it runs out. In orange stance, King Arthur becomes a spinning top and is completely immune to knockups, roots, and slows. While spinning, you can move around a bit with the mouse and slow yourself down by hitting S. And this ability does colossal damage if you hit the entirety of it. Just keep in mind that it is very weak at low levels, and you should only really commit to it when it's level 3 or higher. This ability is a fantastic tool that allows King Arthur to be essentially immune to soft CC and knockups while dealing very high damage and by extension generating a lot of energy. Speaking of energy, let's talk about King Arthur's ultimate. King Arthur generates energy for his ultimate as he deals damage to gods and minions, and this energy is only expelled when King Arthur uses his ultimate. When at 35% energy, he gets access to his blue ultimate, and at 80%, he gains access to his orange ultimate. Once at or above 80% energy, you cannot access your blue ultimate, and you must expel your energy to get between 35 and 80% energy to use it again. In his blue ultimate, King Arthur lunges slowly forward and jabs his sword, creating a large AoE which damages and stuns. This ultimate is used to supplement and set up King Arthur for his damaging abilities. With an auto attack before, this ability actually has significant range, and can catch opponents off guard if they're not careful. Other than in the early game when generating energy is difficult, you can honestly use this ultimate when you see fit to get a combo going. In his orange ultimate, King Arthur becomes CC immune and dashes forward, stopping on the first enemy god hit. If King Arthur hits an enemy god, he and the god hit are both thrust into the air, and are both in a banished state similar to Naja ult. This means that King Arthur is untargetable and CC immune for the duration. This ability deals extremely high damage, scaling with the target's maximum HP. When you should use this ability for damage depends on who you're going on. On a squishy target, you typically want to use this to finish them off, but against a tanky target, you may want to weave this into the middle of a combo in order to confirm its damage. For leveling, you're going to want to max your 1 first, then your 3, followed up by your 2, and leveling your ult whenever you can. This is the optimal leveling for maximum damage, and there's not really any wiggle room. With King Arthur's combos, you just kind of use abilities to apply your CC and damage, setting up your high damage abilities like your 1, orange 3, or orange ult with your other abilities as I mentioned earlier. But here's a combo for each stance depending on the one you're starting in. When in blue stance, auto 2, auto 2, auto 1, auto 1, auto 3, and finish with an ult. And when you're in orange stance, auto 2, auto 1, auto 1, auto 2, auto 3, auto 3, auto ult. You'll notice with King Arthur, thanks to his auto attacks and numerous movement abilities, he can actually cover most opponents dashing away from him simply by using a dash of his own to close the gap, and then proceeding with his combos as he normally would. His matchups are largely CC dependent. In most situations, he will pretty much always outtrade you unless you can hard stop him in his combo and win the short trade. Typically, if he gets damage on you for a prolonged amount of time, you're gonna lose. With warriors, he has a very easy time. His kit is good into all classes, but warriors especially he is great at shutting down. But a choice few will counter what he tries to do. Assassins don't really have many good options against him, he just laughs off a majority of their damage and returns more back than is ever worth for them. Hunters can either be a complete joke or a complete nightmare, usually depending on the meta. In a crit meta, like most warriors, Arthur's gonna struggle. But the less strong hunters are, the better and better Arthur will get. Mages sometimes just have the right amount and type of CC to deal with Arthur, but most of them just fall to the wayside, both in terms of damage dealt and survivability against Arthur. Guardians are absolutely King Arthur's biggest counter, generally speaking of course. They specialize in the hardest CC in the game, and are frequently on par if not tankier than King Arthur himself. This means that his high base damage typically doesn't mean much to them, and even if it did, they can stop him mid-combo no problem anyways. So, that wraps up my guide for King Arthur. Do you think I missed anything? Thanks for watching.